Welcome to the Road to Accountable AI. I'm Kevin Werbach, Professor of Legal Studies and Business Ethics at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. For decades, I've studied emerging technologies from broadband to blockchain. Today, artificial intelligence promises to transform our world. But AI won't reach its potential without accountability, mechanisms to ensure it's deployed in responsible, safe, and trustworthy ways. On this podcast, I speak with the experts leading the charge for accountable AI. Navrina Singh is founder and CEO of Credo AI, which provides software as a service for AI governance. She's also a member of the U.S. Department of Commerce National AI Advisory Committee and an executive board member of the Mozilla Foundation. We talk about the reasons why companies should invest in responsible AI, what AI governance actually means in practice, how generative AI changes the landscape, regulations, standards, and ultimately what the path forward looks like for this whole world of AI accountability. Navrina, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. People have been talking about and studying questions about risks of AI and bias and so forth for a long time, relatively speaking. What gave you the idea in 2020 to set up a company to do the kind of work that you do?
Kevin, thank you so much for having me. So, I've spent almost 2 decades in high tech building products focused on mobile and artificial intelligence. And I would say that, especially in the past decade, I saw not only the proliferation of this very powerful technology impacting pretty much every individual, every citizen you can potentially think about, but also I saw a massive shift in the enterprises where the way we were building machine learning applications had a massive oversight deficit. So let me just unpack that for you, what that means. Most of the teams that I've managed in my career are product and data science teams. And as you can imagine, the incentives for those teams are really to just create the fastest performing models, put them out in the market, and get to the business outcomes that we are looking for. But given the impact of artificial intelligence and given that it is a sociotechnical technology, that means it has a far-reaching impact than some of the traditional software has. What we found was that the way machine learning was getting built in organization needed more compliance, needed more policy perspective, needed more understanding of business objectives so that you can actually put out, this machine learning capabilities out in the market that was not only serving the users, but also the businesses. And I would say that that's what I found that in the way ML ops was showing up in the market, there was an increasing deficit in terms of accountability, in terms of how we were building these systems, designing these systems, testing these systems, especially in production. And so what the idea really was, is there a standardized and scalable way to bring that oversight and accountability to the socio-technical technology, which is going to have such a far-reaching impact in the world that we've not even studied and grappled with the past technological revolutions. And that's what really led me to creation of Credo AI in 2020.
What do you say to companies that are still of the view that they just want to do what you said, get the best business benefits out of their AI? Of course, maybe they need to test it. Maybe they'll do some bias evaluation, but they don't want to invest the resources or take the time to do that kind of oversight.
Kevin, I'm a firm believer that in this new age of human productivity powered by artificial intelligence, the only organizations and enterprises that are going to exist are the enterprises that are going to lead with trust, that are going to be the enterprises that double down on governance and use that as a competitive advantage, not as just a checkbox. And so the thing that I would like to say to those enterprises is you won't exist tomorrow if you don't invest in governance and oversight today so that you can have accountable technology that is actually serving not only your business objectives, but also consumer needs.
So maybe you could talk a little bit more specifically about what kinds of functionality you provide.
Yeah. So Kevin, as I mentioned, AI is a very socio-technical challenge. And so one of the things that we are finding is defining what you're going to measure to make sure that this AI system actually works in your behalf and in your favor is very challenging. So for us at Credo AI, we sort of stepped back and really went back to first principle and thought about what is really socio-technical mean and how do we actually figure out what to measure. And as you can imagine, this was a very interesting interplay, not just in building the tech, but also humans who are involved in building that tech. So the three things we do really well with our software solution is first alignment. As you can imagine, in AI, and especially because it is so context dependent, we are seeing that with foundation models, which are multimodal and are dual purpose and can be adapted to any use case. It is really important to understand the context of use. And within that context of use, it is really important to understand what are you going to be testing these systems against. And this is where the alignment problem becomes really critical. So the first step in Credo AI product that we spend years building and pioneering is really alignment capabilities, where we are helping organizations define and understand and align on what does good look like. And within our platform, the way that we are making that happen is first and foremost really providing out of box policy intelligence, where we have codified what the world is saying what good looks like. And this might come from regulations, it can come from standards like NIST, ISO, it can come from industry best practices, whether it is Defense Innovation Unit's responsible AI guidelines or data and trust alliances, requirements, or it can come from the companies themselves. As you can imagine, there is a need for the AI forward organizations to define what they are willing to be held accountable to. So how do you codify that within the product is one critical thing. And I think for us at Credo AI, the way we are solving that alignment problem is really bringing these stakeholders together around these codified set of guardrails. Once you've done that codification, Kevin, what we end up doing next is using those codified policies as a set of controls to really test your entire stack. And this goes back to the socio-technical nature, because the entire stack does not just mean your data sets, your models, your use cases, but it also means the processes within the organizations. It also means having an understanding of who is reviewing these systems, who is getting impacted by these systems. So in the second phase of Credo AI product, we basically do interrogation of your tech stack as well as your process stack against those requirements. And then lastly, as you can imagine, something that I'm deeply passionate about is how do you actually get those diverse voices actually engaging on understanding is this AI working in our behalf. So in the third step of Credo AI product, there's a massive translation engine, which is basically taking all the outputs of this testing and interrogation against the set of guardrails and translating it so that, Kevin, the stakeholders who are on both sides, whether they are coming from technical backgrounds or they're coming from business backgrounds, can really understand what's happening within those systems. And so the outputs could be things like audit reports, impact assessment reports, model cards, governance dashboards, risk dashboards. But we are really making a very, I would say, concerted and intentional effort so that these stakeholders actually can have conversations at the right level, even though they might not have the same level of expertise in AI, in risk, in policy, and compliance, but they are really coming together to solve a collective problem. Is this AI working for the end users, and making sure that they have the confidence in deployment of these AI systems?
So what's really different in doing this in the AI context from what many organizations have already been doing for data governance, compliance with GDPR, and so forth, or even just overall good IT governance? Is it those particular regulatory obligations?
That's a great question, and we get asked this question quite a lot. I think the way I would like to answer it is having foundation of technology governance, corporate governance, data governance helps, because that just indicates that your organization has already thought about what does oversight for those different functions look like. And you have individuals who are incentivized to do that oversight and governance in those different areas. The reason AI governance is very different, and I would say that certainly does build on that foundation, but needs a new kind of thinking, is primarily because of three reasons. The first reason is it really needs a very multi stakeholder engagement because there are so many nuances to how these socio-technical systems are going to impact users and businesses, that it is not just one person who will hold the keys to understanding how this very complicated technology works. And so I would say the first big change that we are seeing is you really do need perspective of data science, machine learning, risk, compliance, audit, you name it, into this new governance methodology, which can be built on the foundation of what you have. The second thing that is critical, Kevin, is unlike the previous technologies, which, if you think about privacy and cloud, yes, there were evolutions in their journey, but they weren't changing, they weren't as dynamic. With artificial intelligence, especially with these large frontier models and foundation models, the dual nature of those actually is something that we should be very concerned about, but also be aware that there's a lot of more unknown unknowns. As a result of which, this technology is moving so fast, it's getting new capabilities exponentially, that the governance methodologies and frameworks that you might have needs to be constantly evaluated and adapted to make sure that they are making the right guardrails happen for AI. So that's the second reason I think AI governance is different. And I would say that the third reason AI governance is different is absolutely because of the kind of guardrails. And as you can imagine, those guardrails, first and foremost, are still coming to fruition, whether it is through regulations or standards. But the second thing is because of the massive increase in capabilities, new kind of guardrails really need to start surfacing very quickly. And this is something we call as emergent properties of these models. There are things that we don't even know about these systems that is going to change very drastically. And so how do you actually have a governance practice that can keep pace not only with the regulatory changes, but also capability changes is really critical. So I think just to summarize, Kevin, certainly if you have privacy, data governance, cloud, you can build on those governance capabilities, but AI governance does need a new accountability leader. It does need new kind of thinking. It does need this multi-stakeholder perspective to really make sure that you can keep pace with this evolution of AI that's happening.
You've used the term sociotechnical a number of times, and I had another conversation with Elham Tabasi of NIST, and as you know, they very much have that orientation as well in their AI risk management framework. What does sociotechnical mean to you, and what's so important about that framing?
Yeah, the way I define socio-technical is when you have a technological change or capability set that are brought to the market in a way that literally is going to change the way society, this world, our democracy operates. And the impact of that is really far reaching than just a set of small stakeholders. So for us, socio-technical really requires two things, and we think about it as inputs and outputs. But in terms of outputs, the impact of this technology, whether it is ML models being used in hiring or whether they are used in climate change, it is really far reaching. And it really has a very important consequence that we need to, as stakeholders, think about, which goes beyond just getting the next customer, right? So I would say the output part is really important to think about. And then from the input part, this goes back to the development of this technology is dependent on so many different components. As an example, where are you getting these data sets for training these systems from? Are those data sets demographically diverse? And as you can imagine, most of the data that is feeding even these large language models is coming from internet. And, does it represent all parts of different demographics that exist on this earth? No. So how do we actually make a very thoughtful decision in what these inputs to these systems are? So for us, social technical really is this input output understanding of where and how these systems are getting built and who's building them, what is their accountability, but also thinking about the very pervasive nature of impact that these systems are going to have on this world and on the businesses and on the impacted users, which with the previous technological changes, we didn't have to pay as much attention to.
Given that incredible importance, though, is a compliance orientation enough? Shouldn't companies really be thinking about ethics and values and how to raise the level of what they're doing? Isn't there a danger that this becomes just checking a box?
Uh, Absolutely. And I think this is where we started this conversation with who's going to win in this age of AI. And if you are going to use AI governance and responsible AI as a checkbox mechanism, you can already count yourself out. I think organizations that are really going to start emerging as winners are really taking a very comprehensive approach. They are thinking through their not only structures, whether it is who is actually on the table, who's looking and reviewing these systems, but all the way from, are you sourcing the data from the right compliant individual? Are you making sure that the testing is done in a comprehensive way? Are you making sure once these systems are put in production, that the reviews and incident reporting is happening in a comprehensive way? So I would say that if you're going to use it just to get to, oh, am I EU AI Act compliance checkbox? Am I New York City law number 144 checkbox? I think you're really missing out an opportunity to build that trust, which actually can really power your business growth in ways that you can't even imagine. And we are already seeing classically, like in the companies that we work with at Credo AI, that organizations who are taking that comprehensive approach, which is not just a rubber stamping, are already establishing, I would say, core competencies within their organizations that's going to really set them up for success to really be able to innovate and iterate fast, because that's what this new age of AI will need, so that you can respond to the technological advances very quickly within the organization.
How does one measure that or evaluate that? If you're looking at a company or someone else is looking at it, what should we look to evaluate if they've got that real competency?
Yeah, great question, Kevin. And this is where at Credo AI, we've come up with a readiness index. And that readiness index is really focused on a couple of core components, which not only looks at the AI maturity of the organization, but also the organizational commitment, leadership commitment, as well as accountability stakeholders within the organization. And the readiness index basically categorizes businesses, where we've surveyed over thousands of businesses and looked at some of these core vectors of what defines a sort of like a solid AI governance structured company. I would say in that readiness, what we are finding is if you're at these early stages where you are still exploring, the signals that we get from still exploring are those organizations are trying to baseline themselves with the rest of the world. They are saying they're looking and reading what the responsible AI principles that might be emerging in the world are. They're trying to do maybe some light form of audit. They're trying to bring in some outside consultants, and they're trying to bring in some outside competencies to really do assessments of their system. Because they're at these very early stages of exploration, they don't have a stakeholder who's accountable for it. And they're just trying to figure out who they want to be in this age of AI. Now, beyond when you go beyond this exploration stage, you start really aligning. And this is when you're like, you know what? AI governance is going to be critical for us to become leaders in this age of AI. You at least had that understanding. Now you start forming or formulating a set of responsible AI guidelines for yourself. You actually maybe have created a committee, and that committee is starting to discuss what does good look like based on the baseline that you've done in the earlier stages. And this is, I would say, the alignment stage is a very important stage, because that is where really you start to see signals from an organization. Are they going to take actions to further their, people, processes, tooling, so that they can start becoming the leader in AI governance? And then, as you can imagine, there are two other stages, but finally, when you get to becoming an optimized stage or a leadership stage in AI governance, you have actually an accountable stakeholder. It could be a chief AI officer. You actually have a budget, which is as high as your cybersecurity and privacy budget, which is now going to be dedicated to AI governance. You actually have a team of individuals who are responsible for that oversight and accountability across your entire business. You have not only your ops tooling in place for ML ops, LLM ops, but now you also have this pane of governance where many of the companies are using Credo AI, but to really have that holistic tool chain that is providing that continuous oversight. And this is the time you actually start externally sharing assets with your customers. As an example, if you are a financial services organization selling a fraud model to a bank, now along with that fraud model, you will also maybe share your governance report. And that governance report would have all the transparency around how did this fraud model get built, how was it tested, who reviewed it, what kind of industry standards is it compliant to, etc. And that's when you start seeing the benefits, because now the customer, if I am an enterprise making a choice between vendor A and vendor B, and vendor A provides me AI products, and vendor B provides me AI products, but also transparency reports and also governance reports, I, as the user, I'm going to choose vendor B because they are giving me more confidence that there are these transparent practices to really make sure that that AI is going to work for me at the end of the day. So Kevin, in this AI readiness journey, what we are finding is there are different signals. Some early stage organizations are posturing, they're writing blog posts about responsible AI, but actually they start to move the needle when they start to provide assets that can help them land more customers, that can help faster procurement cycle, that can help retain customers longer. They can actually adopt AI and generative AI faster to increase employee productivity. Their employees actually have a very good sense of what they can and cannot use the Gen AI systems for. And I think that clarity exists. So that journey is where we are seeing organizations need to get to rather than just using compliance as a mechanism to do responsible AI governance.
In financial reporting, there's a whole infrastructure of external audit, and that gets regulated and filed with the SEC and so forth and standardized, in addition to the kinds of things that companies are doing internally. Do you think that we need to get to something similar to that in AI?
Absolutely, Kevin. I think they're going to see again a journey to getting to that level. And the journey, in my view, has already started. So, as an example, we are seeing a very interesting ecosystem of auditors emerge. And these auditors, as you can imagine, are primarily third party assessment capability providers, because right now there are no standards against which you can audit an AI system. So audit is a wrong word to use right now. But think about them as a third party assessors who have already been brought in to come and assess some of these models and AI use cases. Classic example of that is New York City Law number 144 that came into effect last July, and it requires a third party review, whether that third party is within your organization or external, of your ML based systems, which are used for hiring. Now, an evolution of that's happening in the ecosystem is emergence of standards like ISO 42001. Now, ISO 42001 is the first, I would say, certifiable AI risk management standard that has emerged in the market. And there needs to be a second standard, which is coming out later this year, which is ISO 42006, which actually will provide auditors the capability to certify against 42001. That hasn't happened yet, but we are already seeing a lot of auditors showing up in this market who are like, I can get you to ISO 42001 compliance, which I think is a good starting point. But as you can imagine, it is very broad. It does not have understanding of use case context. It is really around sort of like a carry forward of, do you as an organization have a risk management framework for AI in place? And that's what ISO 42001 does. The evolution beyond that we are going to see of auditors is when actually more and more of these standards show up, that AI audits and auditors will actually start to emerge. And this is where you as an auditor can say, not only am I certified by a certification body, but now I can actually provide you an independent review and assessment and audit similar to SOC 2 audits that have existed in that category. And then lastly, the vision that I have for this world is, especially if you think about public and private side. On the public side, my hope is that there is responsible AI disclosures that are mandated by SEC to really make sure that an organization, when they are doing their, sort of like earnings reporting, they're also required to disclose how they're building these AI systems. How are they making sure that the responsibility is central and paramount to it? And I think those responsible AI disclosures are not very far out. We are already activating the ecosystem so that on the public side, not only are the investors holding companies accountable, but also bodies like SEC are holding, these public entities accountable. And I would say a flip side that we've already started to see on the private sector side is we actually are founding members of something called as Responsible Innovation Labs, where we came up with our own set of commitments that the private investors will hold early stage startups accountable to as they are building or buying AI capabilities. And these responsible innovation labs, really the initial focus was how do we have that contract between investors and founders who are starting companies in AI to be responsible by design? And if we do our jobs right and these companies become super successful, then when they go IPO, on the flip side, they will have these requirements around public disclosures for responsible use, which should not be a new requirement because you've done that from the beginning. So I know long answer to your question around audit ecosystem, but I am thrilled about the formation of the audit ecosystem. It's just going to be a while till it comes to fruition, but there are bits and pieces that we at Credo AI are already activating or we are working with the ecosystem to make happen.
What's different for AI governance with the rise of generative AI?
A lot. So a couple of things. Again, the way I would like to tackle this is in terms of companies that care about AI governance as a first vector. What has been really interesting for us is when I started the company 4.5 years ago, we were focused on predictive ML governance, and it was really primarily focused on regulated sector. 12 months ago, everything changed. And the reason everything changed is generative AI became truly a democratization of artificial intelligence, where anyone and everyone in any industry could have access to these powerful systems and use it to their benefit and mostly for their own productivity. So I would say that what has shifted in AI governance because of Gen AI, first is we are seeing organizations who are not even in regulated sector actually caring about AI governance because they recognize that with or without them, their employees are going to be using generative AI systems and their risk surface area has drastically, exponentially increased. And how do they not only manage risk, but is there a way that they can actually use it to their advantage and build that trust that we've been talking about? So that's one thing that has shifted. The second thing that has shifted with AI governance is an acceleration in what I like to call adaptive policymaking. We have never seen our government or global governments or global legislatures move as fast as in the past 12 months because there truly is a requirement for how do we not only rein in this technology, but make sure that this technology can be adopted very fast by businesses with the right intentional guardrails. And so I would say that the second big movement that we've seen is in this rise of let's make sure that there are some guardrails in place with an understanding that these guardrails will change. And so I've been a pretty vocal advocate for this adaptive policy making where you don't have to get everything right from day one. You really have to work with some of the core AI experts like Credo AI and the hyperscalers to really understand what does at least the beginning stages of good policy look like. And then we need to have sort of like new mechanisms in our government to be able to iterate very fast on it. And, EU AI Act does, I think they've done a fantastic job in really thinking through what that might look like. Obviously, it has lots of gaps and challenges, but rather than focusing on gaps and challenges, I would say that at least it is the first, global framework that organizations have started to pay attention to. And then the third big thing that has shifted, I would say, is it has put enterprises and stakeholders on alert that now they can't just rest on a technology that's not going to change for another decade. This technology is literally changing on monthly and quarterly basis. So how do you actually embed AI literacy within your organization to be able to respond to the speed of capabilities that are emerging in generative AI. And I think, Kevin, that is really critical because what we are going to see is an evolution on what kind of skills and jobs emerge in this ecosystem because individuals who are able to learn quickly, try out new technologies, are creative problem solvers, are not just like holding on to their expertise forever, but deploying their expertise in AI are the ones who are going to actually start showing up and their jobs are not going to be at risk. So I think we are seeing a very new model of AI literacy emerge within organizations to really respond to this very fast changing AI technology.
Just following up on one thing you said, you seem pretty optimistic that regulation will actually promote better development. Are you worried at all about some of the concerns about chilling innovation, or especially now in the U.S. where we have so many states passing legislation that there's going to be this thicket of laws that actually make it difficult, especially for the smaller companies to comply?
Kevin, the way I think about regulation is not that like I wake up in the morning and say, oh my God, I'm all for regulation. No, I think what regulation is really doing is bringing the focus on how important it is for us to put guardrails around this technology. So I see regulation as a way to wake up enterprises and stakeholders that you need to take action because unfortunately, as humans, I always say this, we are motivated by two things. We are motivated either by ambition or fear, right? And the ambition here is, oh my God, generative AI is going to bring in so much prosperity for humans and for our world, and it's going to make sure that this planet continues to be a thriving planet. And I truly 100% believe that. However, on the flip side, there are individuals who take time to respond to technological changes. And the only way to get their attention is through fear. And I think that's what, unfortunately, regulatory movements I use as a fear that you need to be compliant. Otherwise, there are these fines. I think what I'm hoping to do is change that entire narrative. The narrative really is think about who you are going to be as an individual in this new age of AI, what characteristics and skills you need as an individual. But secondly, what characteristics you need as an enterprise to actually be a thriving business in this age of AI. And for both of those, I would say there are certain core characteristics on adaptability, being able to learn, and being able to build trust to consistently deliver at basically table stakes. And I think for me, when I think about regulation, I think about as a wake up call, not as a way that is the only way that we're going to adopt AI responsibly. I don't think that's the only way. So to answer your question, am I worried about regulation actually being a barrier to innovation? Yes, if it is not done thoughtfully. But the good news right now in artificial intelligence is policymakers and regulators have been very heartened with the private public partnership that has emerged, where policymakers are recognizing they don't have the AI expertise. They will need to lean on AI experts like us. At the same time, we also understand we don't understand the nuances of actually creating a good policy. And this is where we need to lean on the policymakers. And many a times sort of like go against the bureaucracy that has existed and many a times go against the power that has existed to make sure that this technology serves humanity. So long story short, I think regulation is a way to rally the troops around a common mission. Now, can this be a barrier for smaller companies? That's why Credo AI exists. We want to make sure that not only are we holding big tech accountable, through Credo AI products, but we are reducing the cost of our technology and our product so that all the emerging innovators, wherever they are on the globe, can actually use governance as a competitive advantage and compete with some of the big tech at global scale. And that is actually a very important mission for us here at Credo AI, where we don't want this to be a compliance burden, but as governance as an opportunity for them to build their technical as well as capability moats.
Okay, last question. What's the number one thing that someone should look to? Biggest development or biggest area to focus on to understand the development of responsible AI or AI governance in the next few years?
Oh my God, that is a hard question, Kevin, because I would say certainly tracking some of the core frontier model developments that are coming out of some of the large companies is really, I would say, interesting to watch and track because that is going to impact how we live, work, play. Um, I am a big fan of uh, also really engaging with academia, whether it is Stanford's Human Centered AI Institute or whether it is CMU's AI Institute. I think they're really doing some phenomenal work, especially on the accountability and transparency, to really start thinking about what are the ethical challenges we are going to run into and who needs to be on the table. And then lastly, I would say the from the capability perspective, um, I think we need to be a little bit more open to trying out all the new tools. And this is something that I coach pretty much everybody, whether you're a 9-year-old kid like my daughter who is like very well versed in some of these new emerging tools, or whether you are a high school student, or whether you are a grad, or you are an early in your employment, is don't be afraid of artificial intelligence. This is the moment in time to try out all the tools that are showing up in your way, because I'm a firm believer that, again, we are going to emerge as winners if we know how to use these tools to our benefit much more efficiently. And so I think getting AI literate becomes really critical in as we move forward.
Terrific. Navrina, thanks so much. Really wonderful speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
This has been The Road to Accountable AI. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a good review and check out my Substack for more insights on AI accountability. Thank you for listening.